I cannot remember how, when, or where I met Tabitha. It was a long time ago, and my memory isn't great, but I think I met her first in a small old village in London. She told me that she belonged to an ancient family, but I never got to know the last name of the woman who was my friend, my partner in my studies, and eventually my wife. I remember one thing clearly. Tabitha was tall and slim. Later, at the end, she became even more thin. It's hard to describe her. When she came into my office, I only knew she was there when I heard her voice, or when she put her hand on my shoulder. Was it her pure white skin or her thick brown hair? I would look at her sweet mouth, how soft and pink it was, and when she smiled, I would forget about everything. Then I would look into her eyes. They were much bigger than normal eyes. Sometimes when Tabitha was excited, they looked like cat's eyes. They were brown, with long black eyelashes and black eyebrows. But as I looked into them, I realized that there was something strange. I thought about it for many hours, sometimes all night. What was that strange look in her eyes? I wanted to find out. Many times I thought I almost had the answer, but then it was gone. Tabitha was very determined. She was usually calm and quiet, but you could see the determination in her eyes. It felt like a powerful force, and sometimes it frightened me. Tabitha was very clever. She was excellent at Greek and Persian, and she knew many other languages perfectly. She never made a mistake. She was also good at history and math. When we first got married, I often asked her to help me with my studies, and we worked together. But after she died, I was all alone. Without her, I felt lost and helpless, like a child in the dark. When Tabitha first got ill, she wasn't able to help me as much as she used to. She lost weight, and her skin became thin and pale, almost transparent. When I realized that she was dying, I felt so desperate. Tabitha fought against death with all her strength. She was determined to live. It was agonizing for me to watch her struggle to stay alive. I knew she loved me, but I only truly understood the depth of her love when she was dying. She held my hands and told me how loyal she was to me. It's hard to talk about it now, but her love for me was a big part of why she fought so hard to stay alive. On the night she passed away, she suddenly got out of bed and cried.
Oh God, do I have to die? Do I have to lose this fight with death? No, I can't die like this.
But my dear Tabitha passed away. I was so sad that I couldn't stay in the city. For a few months, I traveled around, and then I bought an old abbey in a secluded part of London. This dark, sad place matched my feelings of loneliness. However, I decorated it with bright-colored curtains and carpets. I told myself,
perhaps the bright colors will make me feel happier.
Unfortunately, the bright colors did not bring me happiness. I began to drink too much, but I don't want to speak about that time of my life. What I will say is that one day I married Adeline Arthur. My new wife had black hair and black eyes. She was very different from my first wife, but how could I ever forget Tabitha? I took Adeline to a room high up in the tower of the abbey, where we spent the first month of our marriage. The room was large, with a huge window made of glass from Mexico. The ceiling was tall, like in a church, and there was a large gold chandelier in the center. We had bed from the west and an Indian sofa. My wife Adeline was scared of me because I was often sad and depressed. She didn't love me much. and stayed away from me, but I actually preferred it that way. My mind was always filled with thoughts of Tabitha, my lovely Tabitha, resting in her grave. Sometimes in my dreams, I would call out to her in the darkness of the night. I thought that maybe my love for her could somehow bring her back to me. At the beginning of the 3rd month, Adeline got ill. She had trouble sleeping and told me she could hear strange sounds and movements in the tower.
I think you have a fever. You're imagining things,
I said. Just when she was starting to get better, she fell ill again, this time with a more serious illness than before. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. Once again, Adeline began to hear little noises and movements in the bedroom, and they frightened her. One winter night, she woke up suddenly. I was sitting on the sofa near her bed. She whispered to me that she could hear sounds and see movements, and fear was written all over her thin face. However, I couldn't see or hear anything.
It's just the wind. You can see the curtain moving because of it.
I tried to explain, but her face turned white with fear, and she almost fainted. I remembered that there was some coffee on the table on the other side of the room. As I walked beneath the light of the chandelier, a strange thing happened. I felt something invisible pass by me, and on the carpet I saw a shadow, almost like the shadow of a shadow. I decided not to mention anything to Adeline. I poured a glass of fresh juice and gave it to her. Then I sat on the sofa and kept watching her. After a while, I heard very faint footsteps on the carpet, coming towards the bed. A moment later, just as Adeline was about to take a sip of the juice, I saw, or perhaps I imagined it, 3 or 4 big drops of a bright red liquid fall into the glass. Adeline didn't see it. She drank the juice, and I didn't say anything because I thought it was only my imagination. After this, Adeline's health got too worse, and on the 4th night, she died. Her servants prepared her to bury her and covered her with a sheet. The next night, I sat alone with her body in the bedroom. Strange shadows moved around me. I looked nervously into the dark corners, at the moving curtains, tapestries, and I was frightened. Then I looked at the carpet, just beneath the chandelier. There was no shadow there, and I felt a bit relieved. However, as I looked at Adeline lying on the bed, memories of Tabitha, the only woman I ever loved, came flooding back to me. It was perhaps around midnight when I heard a sound. It was quiet but clear, and it pulled me out from my dreams. I thought it came from the bed. I listened in fear, but I did not hear it again. I looked carefully at Adeline for any sign of life. She was not moving, but I kept looking at her. Minutes passed, and then I noticed a slight color returning to Adeline's face. My heart stopped in horror. I couldn't move. When I realized that Adeline wasn't dead, I tried to revive her. However, soon the color faded from her cheeks. Her face turned pale like marble again, and her lips were thin. When her body grew cold and stiff, I fell onto the sofa and dreamed about Tabitha. An hour later, I heard the same sound as before. I listened closely, and yes, there it was again. A sigh from the bed. I hurried over and saw that her lips were trembling. Then they opened, showing her bright teeth. I felt like I was losing my mind. A pink color appeared on her cheeks and neck. Her body was getting warm again, and her heart was beating a little. Adeline was alive. I did everything I could to revive her. Then suddenly, her color disappeared. Her heart stopped, and her body became cold and stiff. I sat down and began to think about Tabitha again. Then for the third time, there was a sound from the bed. But why should I recount the horrors of that night? Again, I tried to revive Adeline, and then a fourth time. Each time, she seemed to fight against an invisible force, and each time her body changed. I cannot explain how, but she looked different each time. It was nearly morning when she moved again. I was sitting on the sofa, exhausted and tired, but Adeline's body moved with more energy than before. Her color returned. There were signs of life on her face. Even though her eyes were closed, she looked alive. Then she suddenly got out of bed and walked slowly to the center of the room, as if she were sleepwalking. I did not move. I did not tremble. I was frozen, like a statue, paralyzed by what I saw. As I looked at her, my head filled with crazy thoughts. Was Adeline really alive? Could I really see her black hair and black eyes? Why wasn't I sure? I could not see her mouth very well, but her cheeks were like pink roses. Weren't those Adeline's cheeks? But wasn't she taller than before? I was filled with a kind of madness. I ran to her, but she moved away. Then I saw her long hair moving in the wind. It was browner than the brown of wood. And then slowly, she opened her eyes. I screamed like a madman.
These are the brown eyes of my lost love, the eyes of Tabitha.